class, and welcome back to another lecture on Paul's letters. This is actually going to be the final book that we talk about with Paul's letters. There are more, and in particular, there are some of the individual books he writes, like 1st and 2nd Timothy. But man, there is so much to get through for an entire year, and I really want to get on to some of the, what will be known as the general epistles. We're going to start with Hebrews, which is a very complicated but yet rewarding book if we take our time with it and understand it. Before we really get into our lecture today, I want to remind you, and a lot of you received this message on Thursday or on Friday, when you submitted your Thamalio Thursday assignment for last week. Many of you did not read the instructions carefully. I said it right at the top. In fact, some of you may not have read the instructions at all. I get it. We're getting to that point where we're like, okay, I don't want to do school anymore. I know it's not easy. And honestly, I am here for you as for any help that you might need, spiritually speaking or academically speaking, okay? But a lot of you are not taking the time to kind of really actually read the assignments and do them with your best ability. I'm starting to see a lot of decline on that. And so if you didn't see the message from me, then you probably did it right, or I haven't gotten to you yet. But a lot of you did not make a Google Doc. That was what the assignment was to write a paragraph form response in a Google Doc and attach the doc. Many of you did not do that. Many of you actually just went ahead and made a private comment, and most of the time it wasn't even a sentence or even remotely complete. It means you didn't read the instructions at all. So please redo that. I'm going to ask you to do that. It is a quiz grade, so that's important to do it properly. Otherwise, it'll stand as is, graded as is. I don't think you want that. All right? Again, I'm here to help you, so please reach out to me if you need some extra help, okay? Or if you're getting frustrated with things, I get it, okay? This is not a situation that any of us wanted to be in, but we're here, and we believe that God is still with us. I believe that. I feel that. I experience that. And I know that God is with you as well. And so I encourage you to take some extra time, maybe learn how to pray a little bit better, maybe during this time, in a way that really invites God into those moments when you're getting a little bit more down, a little bit more anxious, maybe a little bit more fearful. Okay? All right. Let's get on to today's lecture on Colossians. Okay? So again, like I said, this is the last one that we're going to talk about with Paul's letters. Let's talk about Colossae. That's how you pronounce it, Colossae. This is why it's called Colossians, because it's written to the people in Colossae, another Greek area, okay? So Colossae is one of the largest Roman cities in the ancient Asia region of Asia Minor, rather, not what we know as Asia today, but Asia Minor, kind of the area between Europe and Asia. We would call this Europe today. But at the time in the ancient world, this is known as Asia Minor, under the Roman Empire. Very large city, very prosperous, and all of that. Most scholars think that the church in Colossae was established by Epaphras, or Papyrus, however you want to pronounce that. And so was not actually established by Paul originally, but was helped out by Paul later on. There were other missionaries other than Paul, so he's not the first. And the congregation was made up of mostly Gentile. These were Greek-speaking Gentiles, with a small portion of Jewish audience as well. All right, here's some of the context of it. Paul wrote the letter to caution and give warning to Colossians about false teachers. Okay, so false teachers. The particular message was against a group of what are known as Gnostics. They were part of a group called Gnosticism. That's with a G, it's a silent G, Gnosticism, okay? If you want to pronounce it funny. But these were actually part of originally a Jewish group that kind of then infiltrated some of the Christian or the church at the time. And here's really, here's the main idea of a Gnostic, okay? A Gnostic was a prominent heretical movement, or Gnosticism was a predominant heretical movement of the 2nd century. Really began to grow. It started during Paul's time, but began to even grow even further, and a lot of its teachings began to infiltrate a lot of Christian doctrine, and it was false teaching. Gnostic doctrine taught that the world was created and ruled by a lesser divinity. Okay, so the demiurge, okay, or demigod, that Christ was an emissary of the remote supreme divine being. In other words, Jesus wasn't completely God, not 100%. He was just partly. And so for them, it was very influenced by Greek thought and philosophy, that, if you know much about Greek mythology, you have like these demigods, like Hercules, he's part man, part God. That's basically what they believed Jesus was. And that's not the teaching of the early Christian church. And so there were all kinds of wacky beliefs, because for them, a demigod, if that's who they believed Jesus was powerful. It could do all kinds of things. That would explain the miracles and all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to something like the cross, it really gets messy, because they basically believe that the human side of Jesus died on the cross, but the God side went up to heaven. So God didn't die on the cross, just the human Jesus did. And that's a mess, because then how do we have forgiveness of sins if God did not pay the ultimate price for our sins and to cover them with his own blood, which is what the teaching of the church has always been. And so you could see why Paul would be like, no, this is not good. Don't believe this. Don't be sucked into this false teaching. Let me remind you what the real teaching of Jesus is about. Paul describes in the body section of the letter, there are three main things of components of the Christian life. To be a practicing Christian, to really not just say I go to church or I believe in God. That's not nearly enough for any Christian, yet alone for what Paul's going to talk about. To really follow in the footsteps of Jesus, to live Jesus out every day. It meant three things. Living a life worthy of God. Well, that's a good question for us to ask every day. Am I living today the best I can for God? Is it worthy of that? Do I understand that I'm a child of God? Am I living into that potential? That's a great question. That's a great question to ask ourselves at the end of the day and say, hey, where have I failed on this? Where do I need help for tomorrow on this? Number two, increasing in love for God and for all humanity. So it's not something like there's a cap on love, right? There's just like here's the ceiling and you can't get past that. But that love continues to grow. Our love for our neighbor and our love for God never is capped off, but rather continues to grow the more we walk with Jesus. The third thing is living a holy life, a set apart life, a different life. That really the world should see us as followers of Jesus, that there's something different in us. Not just because we say we're a Christian or say we go to church. Folks, that is not enough. Okay? We're living in a world more and more so now that people need authentic Christians who say, I'm going to care and love you because that's what Christians do. I'm going to be self-sacrificing. I'm going to go out of my way to offer compassion and hope to a world that needs it. See, it should be obvious with our character, not just how we speak or what kind of music we listen to, but every part of our life should be revolved around holy living that is God-honoring, focused on loving God and loving our neighbor. All right, that's going to do it for Colossians. That's going to do it for Paul's letters. Later on this week, we're going to get into Hebrews, and it's going to be great. All right, till the next one.